Nobody in that stadium knew they were about to witness history. Not the commentators, not the analysts who'd spent the week filing their predictions, not even the thousands of Filipino supporters who'd traveled thousands of miles just to watch her play. They hoped, they believed, but even belief has its ceiling. When you're watching a 20-year-old step onto the biggest hard court outside of a Grand Slam and stare down the most dominant player in women's tennis today, and then the match started, and 58 minutes later, none of it, the predictions, the rankings, the so-called ceiling, none of it meant a single thing. Stay with me, because this story doesn't start in Indian Wells. It doesn't even start in tennis. It starts with a girl in a gym in Spain who decided quietly and without announcement that she was going to change what was possible. Here's the thing about breakout stories in sport, we always discover them backwards. We see the moment, the viral clip, the screaming crowd, and then we reverse engineer a narrative that makes it feel inevitable. We say things like, she was always destined for this, and you could see it coming. The truth with Eala is messier, more honest, and honestly more inspiring than the clean version people want to tell. Because in 2024, she wasn't a household name. She wasn't a player the tennis world was holding its breath for. She was ranked 143rd in the world, a number that sounds like progress until you realize that at 143rd you're still miles from the main draw of the events that actually matter. You're still grinding, still proving, still existing on the periphery of a sport that only truly rewards the players at the very top. She'd grown up in the Philippines in a family that understood sport at a deep level. Her father had played professional basketball, her mother had been a tennis player herself. So the foundation was there, the understanding of what it took to commit to a sport, to give it not just your time but your identity. But potential in the Philippines doesn't automatically translate to opportunity on the global tennis stage. The pathway from Manila to the WTA Tour is not paved. It's carved out piece by piece, sacrifice by sacrifice. And for Eala, that pathway led her to the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, one of the most prestigious tennis academies in the world, built on the philosophy of the greatest clay court player in history. Under the guidance of coach Xavi Budol, she spent years there, not getting famous, not trending, just learning, absorbing, training against players who pushed her, losing matches that taught her more than any win could, building the technical framework of a player who belonged in elite company, even when the ranking said otherwise. She won the Junior US Open, she collected Junior Grand Slam titles, but junior tennis and professional tennis are different sports in different universes, and Eala herself knew that the junior accolades, as impressive as they were, would only mean something if she carried that quality into the senior game. 2025 was supposed to be the year she started making real inroads. Nobody, and I mean nobody, predicted what actually happened. March 2025 Miami Open, Alex Eala receives a wildcard entry, which for those who don't follow tennis closely, is essentially a tournament's way of handing a player outside the top 130 or so an invitation. It's a vote of confidence, but it also comes with the unspoken understanding that the wildcard recipient is there to fill a spot, gain experience, maybe win a round or two if she's having a good week. Nobody sends a wildcard player in expecting them to shake the foundations of the sport. Eala's first round opponent, Janina Wickmeyer. She wins. Second round, Madison Keys, the reigning US Open champion, one of the biggest servers on tour, a player who had beaten the best in the world on her best days. Eala beats her, straight sets. Now the tennis community starts to pay attention. Not fully, because one good result can be a fluke, everyone knows that, but they're watching. Third round, Aryna Sabalenka, ranked second in the world at the time, one of the most physically imposing players the women's game has seen in a generation. A player who just won multiple Grand Slam titles, and whose aggressive baseline game had dismantled players who'd been in the top 10 for years. Eala beats her, straight sets, clean, controlled, dominant. In one tournament as a wildcard, she had beaten 3 major Grand Slam champions. Let me say that again, slowly, so it lands properly. 3 major Grand Slam champions in a single WTA 1000 tournament. As a wildcard, no wildcard in the history of the WTA Tour had ever done that before. Not one, through decades of matches and hundreds of tournaments and thousands of players who came through on wildcards hoping to make their mark, nobody had done what Eala did in Miami in March 2025. She didn't stop there. She made the semi-finals, becoming the first Filipino player in history to reach the last 4 of a WTA 1000 event. She broke into the top 100 for the first time. She won her first WTA 125 title in Guadalajara. She became the first Filipino player to win a Grand Slam singles match in the Open era. She began 2025 ranked 143rd in the world. She ended it ranked 50th, the highest ranked Filipino tennis player in the history of the sport. And on Instagram, when someone asked her what 2025 had meant to her, she wrote, "My dreams have truly come alive. Looking back on this year and reliving these incredible memories is such a blessing. This season and all the feelings that come with it is a love letter to my family, my friends, my team and everyone who has supported me throughout my tennis journey." A love letter, that's how she described it. Not a victory lap, not a statement of dominance. A love letter to the people who believed when the rankings said there was nothing to believe in. Fast forward to the beginning of 2026. Eala is now ranked 32nd in the world. She's coming off a strong stretch of results, a quarter-final run in Dubai, a win over Jasmine Paolini, who was sitting at number 8 in the world. A growing sense among the tennis community that what happened in Miami wasn't a one-off, that this young woman was genuinely, sustainably, disturbingly good. But Indian Wells is different. They call it the 5th Grand Slam, not officially, not on any chart, but in spirit, in the way the atmosphere builds, in the quality of the field, in the size of the crowds. The desert setting outside Palm Springs creates something almost cinematic. The mountains in the background, the blue hard courts, the way sound travels in the stadium at night when it's completely full and a match is going down to the wire. It matters in a way that regular WTA 1000 events don't always manage to, and for Eala, this was her first time here. The draw was released. Eala in the same quarter as Aryna Sabalenka. A potential fourth-round meeting was circled immediately by the analysts, acknowledged briefly, and then largely dismissed. The word that kept appearing in the previews was dangerous. One analyst wrote, Alexandra Eala could be a dangerous floater. She's 4-4 against the top 20, 2-2 against the top 10, doesn't rely on her serve, but there's a ceiling, a real ceiling. A dangerous floater with a ceiling. That was the official verdict from the people paid to assess these things. On the other side of that potential matchup sat Sabalenka, the reigning number 1 in the world, fresh off a deep run at the Australian Open, walking into Indian Wells as the unquestioned favourite to win the title. Her serve was clocking above 180 kilometers per hour. Her forehand was generating power that most players on tour simply couldn't handle. She had beaten nearly every significant player in the game at least once in the last 12 months. She didn't lose to 32 ND-ranked players making their Indian Wells debut. That just wasn't something that happened. The match begins on a warm California afternoon. From the very first game, something feels different. Eala walks to the baseline with a stillness that doesn't look like the controlled nerves of someone managing anxiety. It looks like someone who has rehearsed this moment in her mind so many times that being here, actually here, feels familiar. Sabalenka opens with the serve, the heavy, thunderous offering that has broken countless opponents mentally before they've even started swinging. It comes back, deep, angled, the kind of return that says, I'm not here to survive, I'm here to compete. Sabalenka pushes. Eala doesn't retreat. She absorbs the pace and redirects it. She's not standing behind the baseline hoping to outlast. She's moving forward, taking the ball early, converting defense into offense within a single exchange in a way that shouldn't be possible against the world number 1. The crowd starts to sense it. A match doesn't usually feel like this from the first game. Before most people in the stadium have finished settling into their seats, the first set is over. 6-2 to Eala. The murmur that runs through the crowd at that moment, you can hear it on the broadcast footage. This collective ripple of disbelief is one of those sounds that a sports venue makes when it realizes something extraordinary is unfolding. Not polite acknowledgement, something deeper, the sound of thousands of people recalibrating what they thought they were going to see today. Eala doesn't pause, doesn't celebrate beyond a quiet fist pump, doesn't look up to find her team in the players' box and exchange a nervous glance. She walks to her chair, takes a sip of water, and waits. The second set begins. She's not playing to protect the lead. She's not managing the scoreboard. She is going for the throat of the world number 1, with a relentless, structured, precise aggression that the commentators struggle to find words for in real time. Each forehand winner down the line draws another roar from the Filipino supporters in the crowd, and there are thousands of them wearing their flags, carrying their signs, some of them barely able to watch through their hands over their eyes. Point. Game set. The clock reads 58 minutes. The final score, 6-2, 6-1. Aryna Sabalenka, the reigning world number 1, the defending finalist, one of the greatest players currently competing in the women's game, won 3 games in an hour against a 20-year-old playing in her first ever Indian Wells match. 3 games. Eala raises her arms. Her face breaks open for just a moment. Not in relief, not in tears, but in that specific expression that athletes make when something they've believed for years has just been proven right in front of the whole world. Pure, unfiltered, unbelieving delight. The stadium doesn't applaud politely. It erupts. Social media didn't gradually pick up the story. It detonated. In the Philippines, the reaction was instant and volcanic. The match had been broadcast live and millions of Filipinos had stayed up through the night to watch. Within minutes of the final point, the country was awake and celebrating. Sports journalists were filing copy as fast as their fingers could move. The word historic appeared in hundreds of headlines within the first hour. But beyond the Philippines, something equally significant was happening. Tennis fans around the world who'd been following Eala since Miami 2025, the ones who'd bookmarked her name, who'd been telling their friends to pay attention, felt that particular satisfaction of watching a belief validated on the biggest stage. Former champions were reposting match clips. Analysts who'd written off her ceiling were quietly deleting their takes or revising them in public. And Sabalenka in her post-match press conference said nothing dismissive. Nothing that minimized what had happened. She spoke about Eala with the respect that elite athletes reserve for opponents who have genuinely taken them apart. Because that's what happened. She wasn't upset, she was taken apart. point by point, systematically, by a player who had a plan and executed it almost flawlessly against the hardest possible opposition. At her own press conference, Eala was composed, measured, not boastful. She said, "I believe in myself. I've believed in myself for a very long time. I just needed everyone else to see it." Read that again. I just needed everyone else to see it. That's not someone who got lucky. That's not someone surprised to be holding this result. That is a player who came to Indian Wells knowing what she was capable of and waiting patiently, calmly for the moment to prove it. Let's step away from the celebration for a moment and talk about what this performance actually represents for the sport. For years, the conversation around who would eventually challenge the established order of women's tennis, Sabalenka, Swiatek, Gauff, has circled around a handful of names. Players who showed brilliance and then faded. Players whose potential outpaced their results. Players who crumbled under the weight of expectation. The grind of the WTA Tour is unforgiving. It doesn't care about your potential. It doesn't reward your best practice sessions or your junior titles. It rewards consistency, resilience, and the ability to perform at the highest level over a full season, year after year, on every surface against every type of player. Eala is doing that, and she's not doing it with one magical run. She's doing it with a trajectory that, when you lay it out, is almost impossible to dismiss. 2024, ranked 143rd. End of 2025, ranked 50th, career high, highest ranked Filipino player in history. February 2026, ranked 32nd. Indian Wells, March 2026, defeats the world number 1 6-2, 6-1 in 58 minutes. That is not a fluke. That is not variance. That is a player steadily, relentlessly climbing toward the very top of the sport. She has beaten Sabalenka now twice. She has beaten Keys, Paluni, Ostapenko, Schneider. These aren't upsets accumulated over years. These are results piling up within a compressed timeline that shows a player who can compete with and defeat anyone in the draw on any given day. And she is 20 years old. 20. Iga Swiatek won her first French Open at 19. Sabalenka didn't win her first Grand Slam until she was 24. Serena Williams was 20 when she won her first US Open. The age comparison doesn't mean Eala is on a path to replicate their careers exactly, but it does mean that her best tennis is almost certainly still ahead of her. The version of Eala that walked onto that court in Indian Wells and demolished the world number 1 in 58 minutes is not the finished product. It's the early chapter. She has never reached a Grand Slam quarterfinal. She hasn't yet defended a major title. She hasn't spent a week ranked in the top 10. All of those things are still in front of her, and she said so herself. When asked in an interview earlier in 2026 about her long-term goals, the obvious answer, which has always kind of been my answer, is to win slams and to be world number 1. I think those are everyone's dream, and I consider myself to be quite ambitious. No hedging. No, I'd love to get to a Grand Slam final someday. World number 1. Grand Slam titles, stated plainly, believed completely. That's the answer of a player who isn't playing for moments. She's playing for the whole story. There's one more dimension to this that deserves to be named plainly. Tennis has historically had an extremely narrow geography at the very top. For most of the Open era, the elite of the women's game has been drawn from a small cluster of countries: the United States, Russia, Eastern Europe, Germany, Switzerland, France. The sport has produced champions from other regions, yes, but the deep systemic pipeline of talent has flowed from those same places for decades. The Philippines has never had a player here before. Not at this level, not winning matches like this, on stages this large. When Eala became the first Filipino to win a Grand Slam singles match in the Open era, that wasn't just a personal milestone. That was a door opening. That was a signal to every young girl in Southeast Asia watching tennis and wondering whether someone who looks like her could ever compete at this level. It matters. It matters in ways that statistics can't fully capture. The way that Arthur Ashe mattered. The way that Naomi Osaka mattered. The way that any pioneer matters, not just for themselves but for everyone coming behind them who can suddenly see a path that didn't exist before. Eala has spoken about this weight with a maturity that belies her age. She knows what she represents. She's chosen to carry it with grace, rather than either deflecting it or letting it crush her. After her Miami run in 2025, she said simply, "Representing the Philippines at this level is something I never want to take for granted." She hasn't. 58 minutes. That's all it took. Not years of waiting for the established order to step aside. Not a desperate grinding 5-set escape. A clean, dominant 58-minute statement. Aryna Sabalenka, the world number 1, the heavy-serving powerhouse from Belarus, who had beaten nearly everyone worth beating in the last 12 months, won 3 games. And Alex Eala, 20 years old, playing Indian Wells for the first time, walked off that court with the calmness of someone who had always known this was possible. The question we're left with isn't whether she belongs at this level. That was answered definitively on a blue hard court in the California desert. The question now, the one that's going to drive tennis conversations for the next several years, is simply this. If she can do this at 20, making her Indian Wells debut, ranked 32nd in the world, what happens when she's 23? What happens when she's been through another 3 years of Grand Slams, another 3 years of high-pressure moments, another 3 years of her technical game developing under top-level coaching? What happens when the girl who's currently writing the early chapters of this story sits down to write the ones in the middle? Tennis might not be ready for that answer, but it's coming. And somewhere in the Philippines and in Spain and in the practice courts, wherever Eala goes to work tomorrow morning, she already knows it. If this story gave you chills even half as much as it gave us, drop a comment below. And if you want to follow this whole journey as it unfolds, because trust us, this is only going to get bigger, make sure you're subscribed. The next chapter is going to be something else entirely.